everyone, my name is Spacert, and I want to start this video off with a little blast from my past. So I went to a Montessori elementary school, and to teach us parts of speech, they use these little things called grammar boxes. Now, the reason that I bring this up is because the boxes had a very clear order in which the parts of speech were taught. It started out with nouns and articles, then adjectives, verbs, adverbs, etc. But at the very end of all of it was the one that introduced the part of speech that my classmates and I never paid much mind to, and the one that just so happens to be the topic of this video: interjections. Before we get started though, I would like to thank Fractal Fantasy MC 2197 for the idea to make a video on interjections. Researching everything was quite fun, and I'm glad to finally put the video out after such a long wait. Even though the series itself has moved more away towards things explicitly glossed over in conlang into more general linguistic concepts, I think that most of the content here should be generally applicable to any conlang endeavors. With that said, let's get started. Continuing on in my education, through my studies of linguistics, this theme of leaving interjections as sort of an afterthought persisted. They're often thought as existing on the periphery of grammar, and they don't really interact with other parts of speech. They've even been, at times, considered to just be emotional outbursts and nothing more. 18th century British philologist John Horne Tooke, in his book The Divisions of Purley, even dedicates an entire chapter to what he calls the brutish inarticulate interjection, which has nothing to do with speech and is only the miserable refuge of the speechless. So it's pretty evident that there's been quite a bit of animosity towards interjections over the years. Luckily, this trend appears to be fading more in modern times, and there has been some study into the linguistic nature of interjections. But before we begin our investigation, we must first answer the question, what even is an interjection? When we think of interjections, the first things that come to mind are probably words like wow, or ouch, or but what exactly is it that makes them interjections? Well, all of them can stand on their own as a complete utterance, and all of them also serve to express some sort of emotional reaction. So for the purposes of this video, we can define interjections as any word or expression that can stand on its own and is used primarily to convey some sort of emotion or cognitive process. The problem with this definition is that it is very, very broad and includes a whole bunch of different words and expressions. So it would be probably a good idea to separate interjections into a couple of subcategories. What we'll do here is separate them into what are called primary and secondary interjections, and we'll give a little overview of each type. Starting first with primary interjections, these are what one would likely consider prototypical examples of interjections. Stuff like oops, or shh, or huh? These are words or sounds that fit our above definition, i.e. they serve to indicate some emotional or cognitive response and they can stand on their own as an utterance, but what makes them primary interjections is that they can only be used as interjections and can't fill any other syntactic role. They can be thought of as a sort of system of conventionalized sounds which indicate a whole variety of different emotional responses. Across languages, these conventionalized sounds are often very phonologically strange for any given language. Just looking at a few English examples, sh, pst, and we have syllables with no vowels as well as dental clicks, neither of which are found in any non-interjectory context in English. In fact, more languages use clicks exclusively for paralinguistic or interjectory purposes than actually use them as active phonemes. This phonological weirdness contributes to why interjections were for so long considered extra-linguistic. Primary interjections can be extremely varied in form and function across different languages, with similar concepts being expressed with very different interjections and vice versa. However, there is one notable primary interjection which serves as a stark counterexample to this trend, the aforementioned huh? Huh is what's called a repair initiator, indicating that the listener did not understand what was just said. Remarkably, it is extremely similar in both form and function across many different languages. This can be seen in a study by Mark Dingenmansa, Francisco Torrea, and N.G. Enfield, in which 31 surveyed languages had exceedingly similar realizations of their repair initiator or huh equivalent. Because of these similarities, some even consider huh to be a linguistic universal. Next, we have secondary interjections. Secondary interjections are words that, in addition to their use as interjections, can also be used in other non-interjectory contexts. A prototypical example of the subtypes would be saying something like help when calling for assistance, or awesome when you think something is awesome. Profanity also generally fits into the subtype. In addition, secondary interjections also encompass multi-word interjectory phrases like thank God or my goodness. Now the question is, how do these words go from their standard use to transforming into interjections? The main mechanism here is a sort of semantic overextension, where a word's meaning broadens into a much more abstract, nebulous concept. As a result of this semantic broadening, the word broadens syntactically as well, and eventually is able to be used as an independent utterance. And thus, a secondary interjection is born. Let's take the expletive damn as an example. Although as a verb it means to condemn to hell or some other unfortunate situation, as an interjection it usually serves to indicate that something is generally frustrating or negative in some way, which can be seen as a broadening of its original meaning. Secondary interjections formed this way can spawn yet more interjections. One of my favorite types of these are what are called minced oaths, where a vulgar interjection is swapped out for a similar sounding but non-vulgar one. This is actually where the word drat comes from, which is one of my personal favorites. In addition to the diversity in the forms of interjections, there's also a huge diversity in the meanings that they can communicate. A large number of languages have interjections that indicate general things like disgust, surprise, confusion, pain, etc., but that is by no means the limit, and some languages can have interjections with extremely specific meanings. One way this specificity manifests is in various animal calls and commands, with many languages having interjections for specific commands directed at specific animals. How these manifest, of course, is closely entwined with cultural attitudes towards these animals. And speaking of cultural attitudes, the last thing I want to cover is how culture and interjections can interact. Because interjections are used extremely often in conversation, cultural conventions can greatly influence which interjections are used and how they're used in a given conversational context. As an example, in English and most European languages, if someone sneezes, it's commonplace to chime in with some sort of interjection, that being bless you in English. However, in other languages like Korean, this practice simply does not exist. Another example lies in Japanese aizuchi, which are interjections used during a conversation to indicate that you are actively paying attention, a process that can more generally be called back-channeling. While this, of course, is not exclusive to Japanese, these back-channeling interjections are used with twice the frequency that they are in English, and given that a lack of aizuchi can be interpreted as disinterest, it makes sense. And that should be everything for today. Thank you all for watching. This video was quite fun to research for, and though it is, of course, by no means comprehensive, I hope it provided a nice little view into the wonderful world of interjections. In any case, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And this is Space Dirt, signing off.